Power BI has a really robust connector library that continues to grow and allows you to access data from virtually anywhere. So when you open up Power BI, you can click on this Get Data button in the Home tab to access the Get Data dialog box. And this is where you'll see some of the sources that are available to you. Bottom line, it's a lot. You can connect to any type of source data, including flat files like Excel workbooks and folders, databases like SQL, Access Oracle, and IDM, Power Platform, datasets, data marts, and data flows, and online services which are a bit more specialized like GitHub and Salesforce, and other sources like web feeds, RScripts, Hadoop, and more. So just tons of options for connecting to data. Now, I'm not going to cover each and every data connector, but let's open up Power BI and we'll take a look at what this library looks like. So I've opened up our Saved AdventureWorks report, and because Power BI is a heck of a lot more fun with data, Power BI provides a bunch of different prompts and ways to get data. So we can see here in the main report canvas, we have this prompt to add data to your report. Right, and they give us a couple of quick links here for Excel data or SQL Server. You could paste data from a blank table. You could click Get Data here from another source. You could also head over to the right-hand pane and start the Get Data process from here. Could come over and click Transform Data, and then this would launch the query editor like we saw with Chris, and you could actually connect to data here. Or you could select the Get Data menu here, right? The larger point here is that regardless of where you click data, you'll end up in the exact same spot, which is the Get Data menu. So now that we're in the Get Data menu, let's say you're looking for something specific like SQL. You could type this into the search bar, and it's going to limit those search results or the connection options here to only those different SQL connections, right? So if you knew exactly what you were looking for, you could use that type of an option. Otherwise, you'll just default to this All list, which shows you all of the different data connectors available to you. And like we said, it's a ton. Now, looking at the file options here, there are some pretty common ones like Excel, text or CSV, JSON, and then we've got this folder option here, which is actually a pretty interesting one. And we're going to do a demo on this a little bit later. But basically, connecting to a folder allows you to connect to all of the file contents contained within that folder, and then automatically append and blend those new files together. And what's really cool is that any files that you add to that folder over time will be added into that query as well. So it's a really, really great automation technique, which again, I'll show you in a little bit. So next up, we've got some database connectors here, and they pretty much speak for themselves. So you've got options like SQL Server databases, Oracle databases, MySQL, Postgres, BigQuery, Snowflake, and many, many more options here. If we head over to the Power Platform options, these are also pretty straightforward and allow you to connect to data sets, data marts, the Dataverse, and data flows. So again, anything that has been created within Power BI Service or another Power Platform application should be accessible through here. And if we head over to Azure, this contains all of the Azure-specific connections, like Azure SQL databases, Azure Analysis Services, Databricks, and more. Online Services has some interesting ones as well. You see here, we've got things like SharePoint lists, Dynamics 365, Salesforce objects, GitHub, Mixpanel, Marketo, QuickBooks. Again, we've just got a ton of different options here. And this is a place where it's definitely worth looking through some of the connectors just to see what's available to you. And then last but not least, we've got this Other tab. And here you've got some interesting ones as well. So at the top here, we have this web page connector. And here you can type in a web address and then scrape data from a web page. And I'm going to show you a demo on this a little bit later. We've got some other great options here like RScripts, Python, the ODBC connectors, Google Sheets. We'll scroll down to the bottom here. And we've got this one option here at the bottom called Blank Query. And this is a super powerful option, especially if you know how to write M code. So this allows you to generate a custom connection yourself. And we're also going to do a very simple demo on this later in the section, using a blank query to create a dynamic rolling calendar that updates based on the current date. So the important thing to note here is that I'm not going to walk through all of these different connectors. The biggest reason for this is that Power BI has done such a great job standardizing the connection process, and it's honestly remarkably consistent and user-friendly across the board, regardless of a connection type. So whether you're connecting to a database, a file, an online service, once you've correctly entered the connection details and authenticated the credentials, you'll always arrive at the same end result, which is the query editor. So with that said, for the purposes of this course, we're really only going to be using CSV files because they're simple, ubiquitous, and can be downloaded straight from the course resources. Just keep in mind that all of the concepts that we cover in the query editor really apply to everything here, regardless of the original source. So with that, let's quickly connect to our first CSV file, our territory lookup. All right, so for this course, I have downloaded all of the course resources into a folder on my desktop. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to all of the data right from here. All right, and we want to connect to our AdventureWorks territory lookup. And when we open this, Power BI is going to show us this preview window. And the preview window is pretty straightforward, right? It gives us the name of the file origin, the delimiter. Because this is a CSV file, right, the delimiter defaults to comma, but you can see we've got some other options here for different file types. Gives us the data type detection. So it's going to, Power BI basically takes its best guess at the data types based on a sampling of rows. So here it's set to 200 by default. You could choose to sample based on the entire data set or not detect the data types at all. And then from here at the bottom, we've got two options, load or transform data. And load is going to load this data directly into the data model, but transform data is actually going to bring us into the query editor. And that's what we want to do. All right, and as the query editor is loading here, right, we kind of see a familiar interface, but we've got some kind of new options. It's a little bit of a different layout. And we're going to expand this window. So kind of starting at the top here, right? We're going to go over this in much more detail in a later lecture, but we've got some different tabs and ribbon options here. You can see that we've got queries over here. This is the table that we just connected to, that data source. We have our kind of preview window here as well. And then on the right-hand side, we've got this query settings pane that has properties and applied steps, right? And again, we're going to dig into all of this in more detail. So for now, let's update this table name to just territory lookup. So we're going to delete the AdventureWorks portion. We're going to come up here and we are going to save our workbook. Right? So we can click apply or apply it later. What I want to do is I want to actually apply these changes. So Power BI goes through and saves and applies those changes. And we stay right here in the query editor. Okay, great. So at this point, we've loaded our first data source into Power BI. We've saved our workbook. We're in this brand new Power Query interface that's a little bit unfamiliar. Up next, let's cover some of the Power Query options and tools that are available to us.